I wasn't even supposed to speak that night. I wasn't on the program, I wasn't listed in the booklet, and I certainly wasn't invited to stand anywhere near the microphone. But when I saw her, Naomi Blake, clinking glasses with my mother in a private corner of the ballroom, dressed in emerald silk and laughing like she'd just won a war, I stood up. I walked past the stunned servers, stepped onto the stage of the Charleston Club Grand Hall, and reached for the microphone. My hands weren't shaking. Not anymore. 6 months earlier, my mother had stood in my dressing room holding a wedding dress she chose without my input and hissed, "This is where you belong now, Vivian. You should be grateful anyone still wants you." That was the price of failure in the Ellsworth family. It wasn't about losing money, it was about losing image. And I had done the unthinkable. Started something on my own, let it rise, and watched it fall. That fall wasn't an accident, though I didn't know it at the time. Not yet. Back then, I was still the heir apparent of Charleston's most old-moneyed dynasty. The Ellsworth name was woven into the bricks of this city. Real estate, politics, historical preservation. My father, Martin Ellsworth, chaired the Coastal Planning Board and owned half the waterfront. My mother, Claudia, ran the rest: charity circuits, society balls, women's foundations with tasteful logos and carefully curated missions. Together, they didn't just throw galas, they set the tone of who got invited. I grew up in a house with columns and rules, where personal ambition was acceptable only if it aligned with family legacy. I went to Duke, finished top of my class in business, and earned an MBA from Emory before I turned 25. My closet held Carolina Herrera, not Zara. My friends came from bloodlines, not classrooms. Every inch of me was groomed to reflect the Ellsworth aesthetic: gracious, strategic, and impossible to touch. And for the longest time I obeyed, until I wanted something of my own. Just one thing. Ellsworth Realty had never been my dream. Fashion had always whispered louder. Quiet moments sketching silhouettes, studying textiles, losing myself in light, form, and line. I spent years building a business plan in secret. It wasn't frivolous. It was a carefully modeled boutique concept for emerging designers, blending Southern elegance with modern minimalism. A niche Charleston didn't know it needed. I found the perfect space on King Street. I projected a break-even within 16 months. I even had a partner, Naomi Blake, a woman introduced to me by a friend of my father's senior counsel. She came highly recommended. When I finally showed my proposal to my parents, I wasn't asking for their approval. I was asking for capital. Just a start. A chance. My father had scanned it in silence, then set it aside like an irrelevant newspaper. "We're not shopkeepers, Vivian," he said. "This isn't what we do." "It's what I do," I replied, "or what I want to do." My mother's smile tightened. "Darling, image matters." I got the funds, but they came with a warning, spoken like a blessing. "Consider it a lesson," my father said. "Let's see what the real world does to theory." For 3 luminous months, Atelier V drew headlines, magazine features, clients from as far as Atlanta and New York. Naomi handled logistics, while I curated the heart of the space: art, light, texture. I was building something real, something mine, until it all vanished. One call from my accountant. One silence too long when Naomi didn't show up to work. One headline in the Charleston Courier: "Ellsworth daughter scammed in boutique fraud." But that's not the end of my story. That was just the start. They didn't scream. That wasn't their way. Ellsworths didn't raise voices. We raised consequences. 3 days after the article broke, my access to the boutique's joint account was frozen. 5 days later, I returned home to find my Mercedes replaced with a 10-year-old sedan that smelled like mildew and disappointment. "It's a practical vehicle," my mother explained as if I were lucky to still have wheels. A week later, my lease was revoked. The boutique had been rented under Ellsworth Holdings. Of course it had. I'd never really owned anything. I just thought I did. The final humiliation came in the form of a dinner. A Tuesday night just after sunset. The table was set with antique china we only used for visiting donors. but there were no guests. Just me, my parents, and Elise sitting at the far end, her posture perfect, eyes downcast like she didn't want to be here either. The wine was older than I was. My father poured a glass for each of us and said, without a hint of softness, "You embarrass the family." I sat straight, spine screaming beneath the pressure, and asked, "Do you think I planned this? That I wanted it to fail?" "You didn't plan anything," he said, voice calm and cold. "That's the problem." Naomi had disappeared with over $250,000. The boutique was left in ruin. Vendors angry. Legal threats flying. The media circling like crows. And through it all, my family's concern wasn't for me. It was for optics. "You were warned," my mother added, cutting into her steak with surgical precision. "This is why we stay in our lane, Vivian. You're not an entrepreneur. You're an Ellsworth." I should have shouted. I should have stood up and thrown something. Wine, a chair, anything. But I just sat there, tasting the bitterness of my own silence. I remember Elise glancing at me then, a flicker of sympathy passing through her eyes, before she looked away again, like sympathy was treason. The next morning, my credit card stopped working. My phone was removed from the family plan. The pearl cufflinks my father once gifted me to wear at an investor dinner? Retrieved. Quietly. No scene. Just a new kind of emptiness on my dresser. Then came the proposal. Not romantic. Not even respectful. Just a contract, dressed in civility. They called me into the study, where my father always took phone calls with politicians and developers. My mother was already seated, ankles crossed, wearing a navy sheath dress and pearls like armor. Across from her stood a man I didn't recognize, mid-30s, plain gray suit, quiet eyes, average in every way. "This is Caleb Morgan," my father said, "son of Theodore Morgan. They've been our family's legal counsel for over 30 years. I nodded slowly, confused. Caleb extended his hand. I didn't take it. My mother smiled that terrible smile. "He's agreed to marry you." Silence stretched like ice cracking on a frozen lake. I laughed once, just to see if this was some elaborate punishment joke. "Excuse me." "You need structure," she said. "This scandal has made it clear that you're not prepared to manage your independence. Caleb is steady, responsible. He understands discretion." "He's standing right here," I muttered, half in disbelief. "Indeed I am," Caleb replied, calm, unfazed. "And I understand this is unconventional, but I believe we can make it work." "Make what work?" "This isn't a negotiation," my father added. "You agree to this arrangement, or you leave this house with nothing. No ties, no name, no support." My mother leaned forward, voice low. "And your father's heart, Vivian, his doctors are concerned. This stress, they were weaponizing his health." Again, the room spun. I felt caged, trapped in a polite, velvet-gloved prison. And Caleb? He just stood there waiting, not apologetic, not smug, just waiting. The wedding happened 3 weeks later, not because I wanted it, not because I accepted anything, but because sometimes survival doesn't look like a choice, it looks like silence. My mother planned everything. A scaled-down garden ceremony at the family estate. Tasteful and humble, as she put it. Humble was the theme now. Redemption. Apology. Reintegration. The storyline was crafted like one of her press releases. The disgraced daughter, reformed and married to a modest, respectable man. A lesson learned. A chapter closed. I moved through that day like a ghost inside my own skin. The makeup artist covered my exhaustion. The hair stylist twisted my curls into a subdued updo. The dress, ivory crepe, no train, no sparkle, hung on me like fabric with a grudge. My mother adjusted the neckline herself and said, "You look appropriate." That was the highest praise I got. 50 guests attended, down from the 300 who came to Elise's debutante ball. Most were close family, a few business allies, and the kind of acquaintances who thrived on watching a scandal try to repair itself. Caleb stood at the altar in a dark suit that fit a little too well to be cheap, but not enough to raise suspicion. When I reached him, he took my hand and whispered, "Just breathe." I hated that it helped. There was no honeymoon, just a weekend in Nashville at a rustic bed and breakfast where we ate blueberry pancakes in silence and made polite conversation about the weather. We returned Sunday night to the apartment my parents had gifted us on the third floor of a brick building they didn't even own. A beige box with twin beds, hand-me-down furniture from the beach house, and a framed watercolor of a lighthouse on the wall that I couldn't stop staring at. I had never felt so erased. "This isn't a home," I muttered, dropping my suitcase. Caleb shrugged, setting his down beside mine. "It's shelter." I turned to face him. "You're really okay with all this?" He looked at me, not unkindly. "I've lived with worse." There was no bravado in his voice, no bitterness, just fact. The next morning, I started working as an administrative assistant in my father's office. The position came with no benefits, no authority, and no one pretending it wasn't a punishment. I spent my days organizing schedules, printing reports, and being subtly humiliated by people who used to call me Miss Ellsworth. Meanwhile, Caleb left each morning in press shirts and returned late with takeout that seemed inconsistent with his modest income. His supposed job at a small financial firm offered few details. He took calls in his locked office, where I wasn't allowed to enter. He never boasted, never overstepped, but something didn't add up. On weekends, he disappeared for client meetings, sometimes overnight. I started to notice packages arriving, sealed envelopes, business books in foreign languages, a laptop he kept password protected at all times. But the most suspicious thing wasn't what he hid. It was how calmly he existed in all this, like a man playing a role, but not badly. Then one Saturday morning, Elise showed up. She stood in the doorway with a bottle of red wine and said, "I thought you could use a sister today." She was the first person to visit me here. We sat on the floor, drank wine from mismatched mugs, and she looked around like she was seeing the truth for the first time. "They've been rewriting your story behind your back," she said softly. "You're not the cautionary tale, Viv. You're the warning. The one who tried something. The one who got punished." Her voice broke. "I think I'm next." And suddenly I wasn't just angry anymore. I was awake. I started watching Caleb more closely after that. Not because I didn't trust him. Truthfully, I wasn't sure what I felt about him, but because I needed something real to hold on to. Something that made sense. He woke at 6 a.m. sharp every morning. No alarm. He brewed coffee, read the financial section of the paper in print, not on his phone, and always left the apartment in a pressed button-down and clean shoes. His desk was organized with a precision that didn't belong to a junior analyst. His laptop ran programs I didn't recognize, and on the nights when I couldn't sleep and wandered past his closed office, I could hear him speaking in clipped, assertive tones, the voice of someone used to being obeyed. One night, just after midnight, I woke up and realized the other twin bed was empty. I padded through the apartment, heart pounding, barefoot on cold tile. The door to his office wasn't locked for once. I turned the knob. What I saw didn't belong in our beige apartment. 3 massive monitors glowed against the darkness. One displayed real-time market data from multiple countries. Another showed graphs, charts, portfolio summaries. In the corner sat a Bloomberg terminal, equipment that cost more than the car my parents gave me in high school. Caleb stood at the center, headset on, dressed not in pajamas but in a slate gray suit. Not cheap, not off the rack. "The Singapore acquisition must close before market opens," he said, his voice calm and commanding. "Have legal prep final docs for my signature. Send Wilson the press draft." He turned as I stood frozen in the doorway. His eyes didn't widen. His mouth didn't stumble. He simply said, "Give me a second," and ended the call. I stepped in slowly, scanning the room. "You're not a junior consultant." "No," he said simply, removing the headset. Then, who exactly are you? He walked over to a drawer, pulled out a manila envelope, and handed it to me. Inside was a magazine. The cover read Forbes Private Capital with the headline, The Invisible Billionaire, Morgan Bridge Capital's Silent Visionary. I opened to the center spread, a profile of the anonymous founder of one of the fastest growing investment firms in the world. No photos, no interviews, just initials. CM, you're him? I whispered. He nodded. Caleb Morgan, CEO, founder, current net worth, around $4.7 billion, give or take. I sat down hard in the nearest chair. The weight of the lie wasn't what crushed me. It was the precision, the control, the patience. He had been living in a box, eating microwave dinners, and using a faucet that squeaked, all to keep this hidden. Why? His expression shifted, not smug, not defensive, just quietly resolute. I value privacy. I built everything from nothing, and I watched how people changed when they thought I was someone worth knowing. I didn't want someone to love me for what I had. I wanted to know who they were when they thought I had nothing. And me? I asked. What was I, an experiment? No, he said gently. An opportunity. Your mother approached my father's firm. The marriage was a transaction. But once I saw who you were, what they'd done to you, I stayed. Stayed. My voice cracked. They ruined my life, Caleb. I know. Naomi destroyed my career. She didn't do it alone. My eyes locked with his. Your mother funded her. The room tilted. He stepped back to the computer, pulled up wire transfers, foundation payments, email screenshots. There it was, clear as day. Claudia Ellsworth's signature on a donation to a shell nonprofit Naomi had used to funnel the funds. My mother hadn't just disapproved of my independence. She had orchestrated its demise. I don't remember how long I sat there, staring at the screen, at my mother's signature like it was a blade pressed against my neck. My ears rang with silence. Caleb didn't speak. He didn't rush me. He just waited, still, quiet, patient, as the weight of betrayal settled into the bones of who I was. The boutique hadn't failed because I was naive. It had failed because someone made sure it would. Not just someone her. She did this, I whispered. She destroyed me. No, Caleb said, his voice calm but sharp. She tried to control you, but she underestimated what happens when control turns into fire. My throat tightened. How long have you known? I suspected before the wedding, he admitted. Confirmed it about 3 months ago. I traced the money myself. And you didn't tell me? You weren't ready, he said softly. Information without power is just pain. You needed to see what they were capable of before you could believe it. He was right. If he had told me when I was still drowning in guilt, I would have blamed myself anyway. But now, I was angry. Not the hot, impulsive kind. The quiet, cold kind that sharpens into clarity. I stood, walked to the center of the room, and stared at the monitors, at the world he commanded from behind this quiet disguise. Can we prove this? He nodded once. Every transaction, every document, every email. Then I want them to see. I want everyone to see who she really is, who they are. Caleb crossed his arms. Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. Your relationship with your parents, your name in society, the life they raised you for, it all burns. I thought of Elise, of her tired voice that night on our floor, her soft confession. I think I'm next. I don't want that life, I said. Not if it means bearing my voice just to sit at their table. Then we fight. He said it like a promise. Over the next few weeks, our beige apartment transformed into something else entirely. A war room. Whiteboards, files, timestamps, bank records. Caleb brought in Helena Kwan, his chief strategy officer and a former intelligence analyst who'd helped dismantle larger empires with less evidence. She spoke 3 languages, wore black like a creed, and looked at me with clinical appraisal before saying she thought you were weak. That was her first mistake. They trained me, not just with data, but with presence, how to stay composed under fire, how to speak facts while being emotionally baited. We rehearsed every possible reaction for my parents: denial, deflection, dramatic illness, threats of disownment. Your mother will try to interrupt you, Helena warned. Your father will say you're unstable. But the one thing they can't refute is truth, spoken calmly and shown clearly. Meanwhile, Caleb worked quietly behind the scenes. He reached out to key allies, board members of major foundations, editors of publications who had once mocked me, financial reporters he trusted. He didn't say much. He just sent them a save the date: my mother's 40th wedding anniversary gala. It would be held at the Charleston Club Grand Hall, a towering, chandelier-filled shrine to old money and perfect appearances. The room where my parents had announced their engagement, where Elise had her debut, where I had once stood in a sequin gown at age 16, told to smile like a future Ellsworth. This time, I wouldn't be on the guest list, but I'd be there, and I'd be holding the mic. The invitation arrived 2 weeks before the gala. Thick ivory cardstock, engraved gold lettering, sealed with the Ellsworth crest like it was a royal decree. My mother didn't even bother pretending it was optional. Inside, beneath the decorative border and planned itinerary, it read, "Formal attendance requested. Please refrain from bringing personal guests outside of family recognition. Translation: don't bring anyone who might ruin the performance." I placed it flat on the counter and poured myself a glass of wine. Across the room, Caleb looked up from his laptop. "So, you're not family anymore." "Not the kind they want to show off," I said, folding the invitation in half. "But I'll still attend, just not on their terms." For the next 10 days, we prepared like generals. We finalized documentation, clear, irrefutable. Caleb's legal team secured mirrored access to the venue's audiovisual system. Marcus Hale, his head of security, ran through a dozen contingency plans, including worst-case outcomes. "Your father might walk out," he warned. "Your mother might scream. But the data will speak, and no one in that room will forget what they see." Elise stayed quiet but loyal. She agreed to attend the gala, not as a co-conspirator, but as a silent witness. "They won't suspect me," she said. "I'll watch. I'll confirm what they try to deny." Then came the matter of what I would wear. My mother had spent her life dressing me for the part: pastels for sympathy, black for power, pearls for tradition. So I did the opposite. I returned to Lana DeWitt, a local designer I had once mentored before my fall. She welcomed me into her studio with open arms and tears in her eyes. "They tried to bury you," she said. "Let's remind them you're still standing." The dress was crimson, structured, architectural, unyielding, a neckline that said, "I'm not here to apologize," and a train that followed like a red echo of everything they thought I lost. When I stood before the mirror, I didn't see the ruined daughter. I saw a woman who had been forged in fire. On the night of the gala, we arrived exactly 11 minutes late. Caleb wore a midnight black tuxedo, subtle embroidery at the cuffs, a watch I hadn't seen before gleaming beneath the sleeve. No one would mistake him for ordinary tonight. When we walked into the Charleston Club Grand Hall, the hush was almost comical. People turned, heads tilted. The color drained from my mother's face like a storm pulling out to sea. My father blinked once, twice. I could almost hear his jaw tighten, but no one stopped us. They couldn't. We smiled, nodded, circulated. Caleb handed an envelope to the Children's Hospital representative with a polite note, a gift in honor of Claudia and Martin's 40 years. The amount was large enough to make the woman's hands tremble. "I thought you were on a budget," my mother said later, cornering me near the bar. "I am," I replied, "but my husband isn't." She didn't ask what that meant. She just sipped her champagne and said, Try not to embarrass us tonight. I looked her in the eye. I'll do my best. 20 minutes later, the program began. Toasts, speeches, old family friends trotted out memories and metaphors. Elise stood near the back, eyes tracking the crowd. Marcus gave a subtle nod from the side hallway. Everything was in place. Then the MC announced a surprise reflection from the Ellsworth daughters. Elise stepped forward and passed the microphone to me. My mother rose halfway from her chair. Too late. I stepped onto the stage. The ballroom dimmed. Screens lit, and I began to speak. Good evening, I began, my voice steady, echoing through the hall. I wasn't supposed to speak tonight, but I've learned that sometimes the most important truths come from the unscheduled moments, the ones you don't rehearse. So I thank you for your silence in advance. My mother didn't sit. She remained half standing, torn between control and composure. My father stayed frozen, glass suspended midair. Elise stood to the side, her hands clasped, her gaze locked on mine. We're here to celebrate 40 years of marriage between Martin and Claudia Ellsworth, a legacy of power, tradition, and control. Many of you have known me as their daughter, the one who lost her way, the one who opened a boutique and let it collapse in public shame. Tonight, I want to show you what really happened. The screens behind me came alive. Caleb had cued them perfectly. First, headlines from 6 months ago. Ellsworth heiress scammed in boutique collapse. Naomi Blake disappears after alleged embezzlement. Murmurs began. Eyes turned. Naomi Blake wasn't a stranger, I continued. She wasn't a random con artist. She was chosen, placed, funded. A document flashed on screen. Wire transfer receipts from the Claudia Ellsworth Foundation to a shell organization traced to Naomi. Then emails between Naomi and William Granger, my father's longtime associate. One line appeared enlarged on the screen. The daughter needs to fall hard enough that she doesn't rise again. Gasps. I didn't pause. This wasn't about money. It was about control. My independence, my attempt to build something outside the family machine, was seen as a threat. So they dismantled it, quietly, deliberately. My mother finally spoke, her voice sharp. Vivian, that's enough, but I kept going. You'll find full documentation uploaded to the QR codes on your tables. Legal files, financial trails, statements from partners who were manipulated or paid off. Tonight isn't just a gala, it's an unmasking. And then Caleb stepped forward. I'd like to introduce my husband, I said, turning toward him. The man you believed was a junior analyst, chosen for his modesty, his obscurity, the perfect man to humble a daughter out of line. This is Caleb Morgan, CEO of Morgan Bridge Capital. His firm manages over $60 billion in assets worldwide. The silence that followed wasn't shocked, it was stunned, disoriented. My father dropped his glass. It hit the floor and shattered. You arranged this marriage to contain me, I continued, to hide me. You thought Caleb would fade into the background. Instead, he's here as my partner, the only person in this room who never tried to shrink me. My mother stepped forward then, mask cracking. You would do this? To us? After everything we've given you. You gave me your name, I said quietly, and then you tried to take away my voice. I turned to the crowd. I was never the failure. I was the daughter who stopped playing along. The final slide appeared behind me. My original boutique's financial plan, stamped and analyzed by 3 top retail consulting firms, all confirming its viability. The boutique hadn't failed. It had been sabotaged. Elise stepped up beside me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The younger daughter siding with the truth. My father tried to stand, face flushed and shaking, but no one moved to support him. Not this time. Caleb took my hand, and I said, to every face in the room, you can't unhear what you've heard tonight. You can't unknow it. What you do with that truth is up to you. But I will no longer be part of a story written by people who fear who I am. And with that, I stepped down. We didn't stay for the aftermath. As the room erupted, some clapping, some whispering, some sitting in stunned disbelief, Caleb and I walked out through the grand doors of the Charleston Club, past the orchid arrangements, the silver-draped tables, the photographers hired to immortalize a lie. The night air hit like absolution. Crisp. Real. I took a breath, so deep it shook something loose in my chest, something that had been knotted there for years. The next morning, headlines flooded every local paper and half the financial blogs in the Southeast. Ellsworth, legacy challenged by daughter's public revelation. Scandal at gala. Boutique collapse tied to family sabotage. Morgan Bridge, CEO unmasked in shocking twist. My mother didn't make a statement. My father's firm issued a tight, lawyer-drafted response. The Ellsworth family values privacy during this time. But privacy was no longer a shield they controlled. Within a week, 2 board members of my father's development firm had called for an internal review. William Granger quietly stepped down. My mother was removed from the Charleston Preservation Foundation's annual chair position. Her next event, an afternoon tea for diplomatic wives, was canceled without explanation. Elise moved out of the family estate 3 days after the gala. Caleb helped her secure a studio apartment downtown and a position at an architecture firm she'd secretly admired for years. "It's not big," she told me when I helped her move in, "but it's mine." As for me, I didn't go back to the boutique that was stolen. I built something new. With Caleb's help and with a legitimate, transparent investment structure, I launched V Studio, an incubator space for emerging designers with mentorship, resources, and space to grow. Lana became creative director. Helena oversaw strategic expansion. Elise even contributed pro bono design work for the storefront renovation. We opened 3 blocks away from where Atelier V once stood. This time, the ground belonged to me. 6 months later, Caleb and I stood on the rooftop of our new penthouse overlooking Charleston Harbor. It was quiet, unassuming, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with wealth and everything to do with peace. We'd left the twin beds behind, the contract marriage, the arrangements. What do we call this now? I asked him one evening as the sun dipped below the horizon. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. A choice. And that was exactly what it felt like. We had a second ceremony. Not grand, not orchestrated. 20 people. No press. No inheritance-driven seating charts. Just the people who mattered. Elise stood by my side. Lana zipped up the gown she designed just for me. Midnight blue silk, bold shoulders, no pearls. Caleb wore no tie. His mother came. My parents didn't. That was their decision. Later, I received a typed letter from my father. "When you're ready to rebuild this family, our door remains open." No apology, no acknowledgement, just a carefully worded olive branch soaked in pride. I never responded. Some relationships are better left where they shattered. And yet, I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I had been. Not in the way that burned. The revenge had already happened. It wasn't in their public humiliation or their loss of reputation. It was in the life I built without them, in the freedom I carved out of the wreckage they left me. Sometimes, what begins as punishment becomes liberation. They made me marry a man they thought would humble me. Instead, I found someone who saw me clearly. They tried to silence me with shame. Instead, I found my voice in a mic, and when I used it, they fell.